Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by thesoberclub.com. I'm Janey Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi and welcome to the podcast. I hope you're well. I've had a really busy week. As I normally do, but this week it's been really interesting that I've got to do a couple of interviews, for the book. I'm doing quite a few interviews for the book, and I got to be on a podcast with Jason Vale, which isn't out yet, obviously, but we've done the recording, and it was such fun to chat to Jason. I've interviewed him on my podcast, so if you haven't heard the interview with Jason Vale, Juice Master, do go back and have a listen, because he's just so passionate and such great fun. And so I was on his podcast. And it was just great, because it kind of just reminded me of so much of the stuff that inspired me when I first met Jason, because of course he's been doing this stuff for years. I mean, years and years. He's been passionate about taking responsibility for your own health and well-being, and using, the power of fresh fruit and veg. But of course, let's not forget, he also wrote Kick the Drink Easily, the kind of the forerunner to so many of the other books that are on the kind of scene now, on the quit-lit scene. So it was just great to chat to Jason. He reminded me that one of the things he always used to talk about is how drinking alcohol creates CBA syndrome, and people get a really bad case of CBA syndrome. And in case you don't know what that means, it can't be asked. And it's so true. It's so true. When you're drinking, you can't be asked. It's just the classic thing. Even if you're someone who usually has lots of energy and enthusiasm, you get to a certain point in the day and you just, your coping mechanism is, I've had enough. I need to feel whatever, chilled, relaxed. I need to set that kind of boundary between my work life and my relaxation. So the alcohol is what sets that boundary. And once you've had your first glass, that's it. CBA syndrome kicks right in. Anyways, I'll let you know when that podcast is out. Should be a lot of fun. With my clients this week, I think I mentioned to you that it's almost always the way that people tend to be rocking up with similar stuff going on. And I don't know whether it's just that I notice it or whether there's something in the air. But there's definitely been something going down this week or over the last couple of weeks about keeping going, keeping on, if you like. I speak all the time about, the whole podcast is about the freedom mentality, about the positive approach. We're not giving anything up. We are only gaining, about all the benefits that you get when you eventually, ditch this habit. Even if it takes you a few times to go around the block, you get to see the benefits. Your life changes. It's transformational. You've all heard me say this a million times, that I just wish someone had told me how freaking fantastic life is without booze. That's my mantra. That's what I want to change. That's my absolute passion, that I'm so fed up with the answer, to when someone says, I'm worried about my drinking. The answer is, well, let's see how we can make it easier for you. Let's just make it that you have one every other day or whatever. No, that's actually not the first thing to look at. The first thing to look at is, how amazing would it be if you didn't have alcohol in your life, if you were free from that alcohol trap. My point is, I've had a bunch of clients, and obviously I run the Sober Club, and of course I hear a lot about people who remain sober for quite a long period of time. They crack the booze. They even do experience some of the benefits, but then something trips them up, whatever that might be. Often it's not always, but it can be a crisis. A crisis can trip you up, something you weren't expecting. Life throws, curveballs, and then they're back on that treadmill. They're back in that Prosecco land or whatever it is. Even though part of them is telling themselves, what am I doing? I know that life was better for me when I wasn't drinking, but somehow they get sucked back in to that alcohol trap. And so what's been coming up, and it's been quite interesting, is, I've had clients who are saying, that I'm starting to feel balanced now. I'm starting to, I'm not necessarily in the euphoric phase of the pink cloud, which is fabulous, but, doesn't hit everyone and doesn't always last forever, of course. But they'll say, I'm more balanced now. I'm able to see the good and the bad, as it were. I'm able to see aspects of my life that aren't necessarily working. I'm able to recognise the benefits that I am getting from sobriety, but I'm a bit nervous about keeping up that resilience. I'm a bit nervous about the future. I really want to kind of belt and braces this feeling, and I think that's so sensible. That's why connection is so important. That's why constantly reinforcing, why you're doing this is super important. And of course, I'm not saying we have to, spend all day every day, even if you've been sober for years, you spend all day every day reading Quit Lit. Although, of course, I'll be very happy if you read my book because there's loads of health and wellbeing stuff in there. But it just means staying inspired, keeping sight of why you're doing this and of how great it is, rather than allowing your unconscious mind to let you slip back into despair, particularly if life throws a curveball. Anyways, I kind of said all of that because that's why I really wanted to interview my guest this week, who is Paula Kerr, who's written a book called Fitter, Stronger, Resilience. If you're going through hell, keep going. It's all about resilience. And I thought that would just fit super well for whatever stage you're at in sobriety or anything else. And Paula's story is not actually around alcohol, as we'll find out. But I do think some of the principles apply, whatever behaviour change you're trying to make. It sounds like I'm on a racetrack, doesn't it? Apologies, that's a neighbour with a really noisy motorbike. I do apologise if you're thinking that I had some kind of curry. Anyways, right. So, but before we do that, we've teamed up this week with Bumblezest. You know that I've been trying to feature some great brands of drinks, some alcohol-free drinks. So, your classic beers and your botanicals and all of that. But sometimes just what we would perhaps call, in inverted commas, soft drinks, drinks we can pick up in supermarkets, in Holland and Barrett and Ocado and Whole Foods, or wherever you're lucky enough to be able to shop if you've got, those kind of great health shops near you. And I came across this brand of drinks called Bumblezest. I mean, lovely funky packaging, which always helps. And I just thought I'd really love to mention them on the podcast. We've also got a great competition to win some. So they're a husband and wife team, Emily and Dan, and they literally dreamt up this range of drinks in their South London kitchen. And they decided to just use natural ingredients that focused on health and vitality and all of that. And this came about because Dan was working in property, living in a city, just drinking too much, basically, drinking too much coffee, too much alcohol, and feeling really stressed and anxious. Also had skin issues. And of course, that's, a subject that is close to my heart because, of course, what you eat and what you drink will also affect your skin. So Dan started off by drinking lemon water with honey and sometimes mixed in herbs from his little kitchen garden, his Battersea garden, and then decided to create more recipes and eventually thought, I can do this. So they've got these fabulous ingredients. All the drinks are gluten-free, nut-free, dairy, lactose-free. They're all vegan. Apart from, there's one that contains honey. The Revive and Restore contains honey and collagen. So they've got this great collection of drinks. They've got shots. So these are super useful. You can just take them on the go. And they've also got cans, if you want a longer drink. And there's also a CBD tonic water. That's really unique. So you can add this CBD tonic water to, one of your botanical spirits or whatever. And each drink has got up to 9 different healthy functional ingredients. So, all of these ingredients that we talk about all the time that we want to try and squeeze into our daily life. But, it's hard because you don't always think about, what can I make that's got, matcha in it and apple cider vinegar and spirulina? And, well, the answer is they're all here. It's got those 3 as well as ginger and turmeric and lemon and cinnamon and collagen in some of them, even activated charcoal, and they're very low. It's very low amounts of sugar because they're basically just using the lemon juice as the fruit base. And all the packaging it looks beautiful, and it's all environmentally friendly as well. So, what's not to like? Really great brand. Bumblezest.co.uk is the website. And as I say, you can find them in some of those bigger stores, those bigger health stores. And we've got a competition to win some. So you can win a month's worth of Bumblezest products. There's 48 sparkling cans, I think we've got in the pack, made up of 3 flavours. And then there's 20 vegan health shots, and there's 5 different flavours there. So this is a fantastic prize. So check out thesoberclub.com and all my competitions at imperfectlynatural.com as well to check out those drinks from Bumblezest. I'll also put the link in the show notes if you want to try those out. Just before we go into our interview with Paula on resilience, just a reminder that we do have our Champneys retreats, self-care and sobriety they're called, at Champneys in Tring. We've got one in May, but I'm pretty sure it's booked with a waiting list. There's one in June, I think it's June the 26th. It'd be great to, if anyone wants to have a look at that. Again, just go to thesoberclub.com and click on events. I'm really hoping to add some more events in there, by the way, now that things are perhaps, starting to free up a little bit. I'm looking forward to doing something with Hello Love. It's the cancer charity that I've mentioned to you lots of times. They're based in Bloomsbury. They're part of my Platinum Awards this year. They do such amazing work. If you are ever in that area, they've kept going throughout the whole of lockdown, despite everything, despite having zero funding. They've kept going because they prepare fresh juices for people with cancer and people going for treatment. They've got a little vegan studio cafe and some amazing little artworks and organic skincare and just some funky stuff. So it's called Hello Love. It's in Bloomsbury. Little plug for them. They're just amazing. And at some point, hopefully, we'll do an event there because it's a really nice space to do the kind of things that I like to do on retreats, yoga nidra, or whatever it is we decide to do. I think we're going to do a sound healing actually, so that would be really cool. We'll try and get that sorted. Just for the future as well, if you fancy a day by the seaside, I'm going to be doing some by the sea day retreats. So I'll tell you more about that later. You know how much I love the sea. So any excuse to get there. It won't be far away. It'll only be in Essex. Sadly, I can't make it to Cornwall. It's a bit too far. But I thought it'd be a nice excuse to get some sea air. If you'd like something more kind of intimate, more one-to-one, or a very small group. Without further ado then, let's talk resilience. My guest is Paula Kerr, who is an author, personal trainer, and founder of Fitter Stronger, which is also the title of the book. Have I got that right, Paula?
Yes, it's Fitter Stronger, Resilience. If you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, absolutely. I really like the book, and I thought it would be great to have a little chat with you because, one of the things that comes up so often for, in my community and people that contact me is this kind of thing of they're doing okay until they're not, and then life throws some kind of curveball, and so whatever it is you're going through, this word resilience is such an important one, isn't it? It really is so important. So anyways, I've read the book, but for everyone who hasn't read it yet, just give us a little bit about your background. What happened for you and what brought you to this place.
Okay, so there are 2 reasons really. One seemed like a really obvious one seemed like a bit less obvious until later on. So what I mean by that is I was working as a journalist quite happily, as a news journalist, mum of 2, married, kind of having a really nice life, doing all my favourite stories. I've been working as a journalist for the best part of 30 years. So I was able to do lots of exciting stuff and travel the world and, hang around with people in exciting jobs and cover wars and cover all kinds of stuff over a long period of time, which meant that I, in that time, saw the very best of humanity and humanity at its very ugliest as well. And I was quite happy in that job. I was fascinated by people, always had been, and wanted to learn more, wanted to see more places, wanted to explore more cultures. So it was the perfect job for me, and I was having a great time. And then I, 7 years ago, was diagnosed with breast cancer out of the blue. No kind of, it was some routine surgery, which led to an investigation, which led to breast cancer. Quite an aggressive breast cancer, which led to 2 years of treatment, of surgery, chemotherapy, a whole range of stuff that went on for a really long time and really upset my apple cart. So I had to find a way forward with that. And everyone has their own coping mechanism. Hopefully, I think it's really important to try and identify what yours is, whatever that is. For me, I was already going to the gym. I'd spent a lot of time being sick on the school run, trying to pretend everything was okay. And I needed somewhere to go where I could completely be myself. And I was already going to the gym, you know, and kind of no more than anyone else, diving in for a few sessions here and there, and working with a personal trainer, and he was great. And at that point, I knew absolutely nothing about what aggressive breast cancer really meant and kind of what was really ahead. But the only thing I knew was that I had to try and keep my body strong somehow to deal with that. And I had to try and keep my head in the right place as well. So I needed somewhere where I could go and be myself. And that was somewhere where I could go and be myself. I could rock up with no hair, no nails, no makeup, no nothing, looking pretty awful. And I would just get a friendly nod from somebody else on the gym floor, and I'd give them a friendly nod back, and I'd know they had my back, and I would just carry on. And I didn't have to pretend everything was okay. I could turn up and just do the little bit I could do and make the best of my day. And whatever I did within that environment, it was a little bit more than I could do the day before. And I was gradually putting one foot in front of the other, whichever stage of treatment that was. So chemotherapy was every 3 weeks. So that meant gradually, when I was ready and past that set of treatment, I build myself back up, get into the gym, and gradually try and do a little bit more each day until I was knocked down again with the next bit of treatment or the next surgery or whatever it was. And it just made me feel stronger, and it gave me some control in a situation where I felt I didn't have any control. And it wasn't all about me. I had to think about my kids and how they were going to be at school and make sure they were happy and secure and all of that stuff. You had to manage the expectations of others. So people don't always know how to react, do they, when you're dealing with somebody who's going through some stuff. So sometimes, you know, they're all there for you, and sometimes they're just a bit rabbit in headlights and don't quite know what to do. So you're managing all of that stuff as well. So this was one place where I could really be myself. That started to matter more and more as I went along. Like I said, I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years. I've done a lot of exciting stuff and had a really great time. And I was starting to get really interested in this exercise stuff and why it was becoming so powerful for me. And then I had a bit of a eureka moment. I was in the gym one day and there was a little advert sitting in reception saying, we're looking for somebody to train as a fitness instructor. We'll give you all the training and we'll give you everything you need, and then you'll be able to work on our gym floor. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And I thought, well, you know, I'm the wrong side of 40 in my head. I didn't look like what I thought a gym instructor looked like. So I wasn't expecting much of it, but I'd also got to a point in my life where I was very much the what's the worst that can happen frame of mind. So I've been through cancer treatment, so get turned down for a job, hey, it's no big deal. I'll just carry on doing the thing I was doing. So I thought about it, and then on my way home I stopped the car and I pulled over and I made a phone call and said, are you still looking for people for this job? And they said, yes, the interviews are in 3 days. Send us your CV. So I sent it in and I was still thinking, you know, this will go nowhere. And I went in with no expectation and couldn't have been more surprised when they said, you've got the job. So I took the job and I learned how to be a gym instructor working on the gym floor. And I just liked how I was starting to see some improvement in people, not just in, you know, getting rock hard abs, but in trying to see whether I could make them more confident. And bit by bit, you would see that confidence grow. And I loved that. And I wanted to be able to do more of it. So then I went off and I trained as a personal trainer so that I could work one-to-one with people. During my treatments, if we go back a couple of steps, I was getting really frustrated with the fact that with somebody with cancer was being turned away. I was being turned away by spas and stuff. I couldn't go in for a massage, even though I had ridiculous amount of drugs through my body at that point. My oncologist was all for it, but they were very, very cautious in those kind of places. There was also nowhere to go to get some no-nonsense advice about how to look after your body and possibly your mind when you're going through something as big as that. So I was looking around for like a sort of a retreat or a kind of fitness holiday of some sort that was suitable for me, and there wasn't anything. So I thought I'd create one. So I pulled together the people that I've been working with. So great personal trainer, a little team of those actually, a brilliant team of nutritionists and so on. I wanted somebody to motivate these people and be able to stand up in front of them and say, I've been there and you can too. So I got in touch with James Cracknell, who I'd interviewed a couple of times as a journalist before he had his brain injury and afterwards. And I'd seen how he gradually put himself back together again. And that's exactly what he'd done. So he was a world-class Olympic athlete with 3 gold medals to his name. When it all went wrong for him after that brain injury and his dreadful accident, he did what I did. He took himself into a gym and he gradually tried to make improvements of his own, take ownership of that situation. And by making those improvements, felt he had a bit more control. And I thought, well, if this stuff works for an Olympic athlete and it works for a mum of 2, then surely it's going to work for a ton of other people. So let's put something together. So that's where Fitter Stronger was born, bringing together all the best information and trying to create something where people could go when they were dealing with illness, injury or trauma. And as I said, later on, I wanted to be more involved. So I trained as a personal trainer and now I take a bigger role in all of that. But they still run every year, those things, those retreats. We've got another one in May. And there's also one in South Africa because I'm kind of really interested in conservation and how nature nurtures, how by being outside, your shoulders naturally start to come down. You start to think more clearly when you're moving around outside. And I don't know about you, if I'm sat at my desk all day and I'm trying to figure something else out and the penny doesn't drop, the minute I take my dog out, I've done a couple of laps and I know exactly what the answer is. So I created Fitter Stronger Goes Wild. So that operates on a game reserve in South Africa when we can. We'll be back out there. And then I wanted to work with young people. So Recharge was born. I was getting such good feedback from the people that were coming along to the retreats. They're still writing to me now, even the people that came to the real early ones many years ago, saying, guess what I'm doing now? Because they just got that little bit of confidence. And they went on and did the next thing and then the next thing. And I thought, well, as adults, we've got an amount of emotional intelligence just based on experience. We kind of know what our fight or flight reactions are going to be. But as young people, I thought back to my kids and how they were when I was ill and how confused they were. But they haven't got that amount of emotional intelligence. They've not been around the block like adults have. So if you're going through something really big and you're quite young, then that's even more confusing, right? So I've created something called Recharge, which is a version of what I do with adults, but I do it with kids. I've been doing it all day today in a school actually, and work with thousands of kids now in schools and colleges and universities, trying to give them coping mechanisms and some ownership when they're feeling a bit lost. So that's a lot of what I do.
Sounds amazing. And one thing I loved about the book was right at, early on in your journey, when you were given your cancer diagnosis, which must have been just such a massive shock, totally out of the blue and just absolutely awful. You were, I can't remember if it was an oncologist or a doctor, basically said to you something along the lines of words to the effect of, accept it because there's nothing you can do to change the situation, which was like red rag to a goddamn bull. And, it seemed to me your attitude was, I bloody well will change it, and I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that's so incredible and so important. And also shocking that someone in the medical profession would be that damning. I find it shocking, actually. I still do. I hear. I mean, I come across people in the medical profession who, when you rock up and you're brave enough to say that you're worried about the amount of alcohol you're drinking, rather than saying, you know what, I've got the most fantastic suggestion for you, ditch the booze, you're going to feel amazing. It's a completely sort of negative approach, if you like. Anyways, tell us about that. What happened when you were given that statement.
It was quite a defining moment, actually, and it comes back to these fight or flight mechanisms that we have, that we develop based on how we've reacted to other things in the past and what the outcome of that reaction has been. And in this case, it was the very first meeting with my oncologist. It's quite a big deal. I was wondering what on earth I was in for. I kind of made up my mind by then. There'd been lots of back and forth with various surgeons and breast care nurses and so on, that whatever happened, throw it my way and I would take it head on, and we'll take this thing down as best we possibly can, with no guaranteed outcome, but let's just give it its best shot. So I went in there, and I remember sitting watching people coming out. They kind of had their heads bowed, almost, you think they're almost, praying to these guys. And these patients were coming out feeling, looking very kind of accepting and scared. And I went in, I suppose, partly as a patient, but partly as a journalist. I wanted to know everything. So I wanted to know what the effect of this treatment was going to be, why we were having it, what the other options were, etc., etc. And you see this guy was just, okay. He didn't have all the answers, and that's fair enough. But there were some things I really wanted to know more about. And I said to him, look, I've spoken to a friend of mine who was in my position a couple of years ago, a similar position with breast cancer. So I've decided, I'm going to really get hold of my nutrition. I'm going to sharpen that right up, and I'm going to do some exercise whenever I can. I'm going to try and stimulate my body to work well with this treatment and come out the other side. And he was looking down at his desk and kind of going, and he swung his chair around to face me and just looked me in the eyes and said, there's nothing you can do to change your situation. Exactly what you just said. Those were his words, and I've never forgot them because they were so damning. And it was, as you say, a red rag to a bull. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me here. I'm not just going to roll over and let this take me down. And so, like I say, I think it comes back to our reactions to other trauma in the past. And my other big curveball I had in my life came much earlier. When I was about 10 years old, my father was an alcoholic. He was a drug user. And there's a long story leading up to that, which is his story. But when I turned 10, just after that 10th birthday, a lot had happened in his life that he couldn't face any longer. And it's terribly sad. And he committed suicide. And at that point, you're very confused. You're 10 years old. You don't even know what suicide means. And that was suicide in the 70s when nobody talked about mental health. It was very much swept under the carpet, caused even bigger problems. So when you've got somebody, when you've been through something like that and you're starting to come out the other side of it and you've carved some sort of life for yourself and you've looked back over your shoulder and thought, I'm not going there. I don't want to be what all of that was about. And there's a lot of violence in my house. I spent a lot of time in and out of other people's living room floors with my family, in and out of refuges and all of that kind of stuff. Just trying to, as my mother was just trying to get us by, just trying to get us through life. And then this happened, but she absolutely didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't to be discussed. And it took a lot of moving forward from there. So as a result, the next big thing that comes along, cancer, was certainly not the scariest thing in my life. I'd had something far scarier earlier on, and I'd managed to come forward from that. So if somebody turned around to me on diagnosis and says, nothing you can do to change your situation, I've done everything to change my situation in the past and create an exciting career and a family that's secure and happy and all of those things. So if somebody's talking about cancer and roll over and take it, that was never going to happen. It was never an option. So I just got very mad with him, with cancer, with all of it. And then that became kind of the beginning of me wanting to make change and get through this in the best possible way I can. And that doesn't mean that every day I was bouncing around the gym. I certainly wasn't. There were days when you were on your hands and knees, and days when you couldn't eat anything, and days when you were in tears and all of that stuff. And there was tons of that. And that, when I work with my clients, a lot of those are dealing with illness, injury and trauma. They're in a shocking situation. And the first thing I say to them is just go back to basics. Just try and get through today the very best way you can. Do the basics today. If you're in the middle of some kind of physical or emotional storm, do the very best you can do for those and those very close to you today, and ask no more of yourself. Go back to basics. Take all the pressure off, take the layers off of your life, and then try again tomorrow, and then try again the next day, but keep trying. And we all talk from experience, and that was my experience was just keep trying. Kept trying when I was younger to create something new, and kept trying when I was older to get through cancer. And everyone's different, and we come from a different perspective, but I think sometimes we do expect too much of ourselves. We try and put a face on, pretend everything's okay, and it isn't. And we just have to maybe take some of the pressure off and just try and get through today.
Yeah, and I love that in the book. You know, you've got loads of tips for, as you say, just getting through some of those basics. You know, and you know, you've got some stuff in there on nutrition and well-being and some references where people can go. You know, so all of it's in there. Of course, you know, the thread that runs through it is your brand. You know, the fitter, stronger stuff. Do you feel that you know, exercise, fitness, kind of getting back to the body is nearly always the answer? I mean, the reason I ask that question is because you know, there will be people listening to this who do have some kind of trauma, you know, whether that's illness or whether that's addiction or, you know, whatever it is, stuff going on with relationships, and they're in that place where they want to be able to, you know, kick this in the teeth. They want to be able to fight back, but they kind of don't know where to start. And for them, fitness isn't a thing, right? You know, it was a thing for you already, but for them, it isn't a thing. And so should they still try that? Could that still work for them, even if, you know, it hasn't in the past? Would you do you always think that getting back into the body helps?
I really think it does, but you're quite right. When I talked right at the beginning about coping mechanisms, it's not everyone's coping mechanism. For some people, that's going to be getting the paints out and expressing themselves that way. Some people, it's just going to be just getting the dog out and just being with that animal and just being around nature makes them happy, and that helps them think more clearly. For other people, it's writing everything down, getting everything down and clearing it out of here and onto that paper so you can see what's in front of you, and then try and break that down. Everybody's got their own thing, so I'm not going to march anyone up to any gyms, but what I do think is that with exercise, two things happen. There's the physical reaction, so you release those endorphins, you release dopamine, so you start to feel a lot calmer. You can start to make clearer decisions. That's vital if you're going through trauma. I think that's one thing that you can do for yourself that's just going to help you sleep a little bit better. Something that's going to help you look at your situation and try and make a decision for today, and then start again and try and make a decision for tomorrow. It's going to affect our sleep. It's going to affect our energy levels. And massively going to affect our positivity. And it doesn't have to be complicated. We don't have to have a personal trainer. We don't have to go to the gym. We don't have to join a class and be with other people. It can be as simple as just putting your shoes on and putting one foot in front of the other. And if I take that to its nth degree, when I've written about it in the book, but there was a big defining moment in my treatment, which was that I was supposed to be climbing Snowdon with some friends.
Oh yeah.
Before I was diagnosed, and it was the first thing that made me mad as hell because I had to cancel it. And I really wanted to do it. And I tried to convince myself that chemotherapy was going to be fine and I'd get up the mountain. And of course it wasn't. So my friends very kindly said, hey, listen, don't worry, leave it for a year and we'll come up with you. And a year went by and I was starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I was about 3/4 of the way through my treatment. And I said to those friends, you know what, if we're going to have a mountain, let's have a really dirty big mountain. Let's do Ben Nevis instead. And that one thing that will happen when you're ill is that people will agree to anything. Your friends will agree to all sorts to help you out. So they very kindly, at least, smiled to me that they would do Ben Nevis with me, and we did it. And when I got to the bottom of that mountain, I'm 5'2", and I'm quite petite, and I got to the bottom of that mountain, and it's huge and big and dirty, and it's got snow in it most of the year round. And I looked up at it with all these people around me. And I thought, well, you know what, for the last 18 months, all I've been trying to do is just put one foot in front of the other. And if I can put one foot in front of the other, I can get up and down that mountain. Now, when I went to do it the following day, and I stood at the bottom of that mountain and off I went, I burst into tears. And I kept crying all the way up that mountain, which was exhausting, by the way. So if you're going to do a mountain, absolutely don't cry on the way up. It's quite hard. But it was just overwhelming. This was a big line in the sand for me that I was moving forward and leaving that diagnosis behind, and it wasn't going to define me. But essentially that's all it meant, putting a pair of shoes on, doing a bit of walking, and then turning up on the day and doing a big bit of walking. And that's all it was. So we don't need to join a gym to make a difference to our mental health or through exercise. We can just leave the house. And I know even saying just leave the house sounds like a really big deal some days. So in lockdown, Mind were advising, if you don't feel like you can get out the house, get to a window, just start looking outside. And if you start seeing enough to tempt you outside, maybe just make a plan to do a very short journey, a very small walk, and do that and see how that makes you feel. And if that feels good, then try it again the next day, and then the next day, and see where it leads. And it doesn't have to be about big exercise jaunts. It doesn't have to be about expensive lycra or any of that stuff. It's just about wanting to. So the one thing is it really affects our brain. The other thing is that if you start to see improvements in your mental health or in your physical health, and they're improvements of your own making, then it kind of makes me think, well, if I can do that, then what else can I do in other areas of my life? It's a transferable skill. So maybe if I'm starting to feel better about this, maybe I can tackle that other thing.
Yeah.
So exercise isn't all about jumping about and getting sweaty. It's about all of that other stuff too.
Yeah, I love in the book you've got, some exercise routines. You give some suggestions. You've got a lovely little section called the exercise pill as well. I really like that. A great way of prescriptive medicine, as it were, actually move your body. But you've got some little routines that just take 8 minutes, just simple things that people can do. Anyways, I could keep you talking for hours. You've got some lovely recipes in the book. You've got some nice ways of getting satisfying a sweet tooth in a healthy way. Lots of the stuff that I talk about in my books. I'm really pleased to see you covering some of this stuff. It's brilliant. One thing that you finish up the book with by talking about the fact that connection is keeping the lines of communication open. It's really important, and I think that that's something I talk about a lot. And the fact that, and certainly when you hear about people who have illness or trauma, it can be very easy to actually just retreat and kind of go within. I've seen it a lot in the first lockdown. I saw it with quite a few sober club members, just disappeared, sort of went away, and then when you kind of track them down, the feeling is one of I'm finding this so difficult that I can't tell anyone. And it's always that thing that people feel they're the only ones, and they feel that kind of sense of shame, even though they haven't done anything wrong, but that the sense of shame as to what's going on with them. So they don't feel they can reach out, and yet actually that's exactly the time that they should be reaching out. So just tell us what you mean about keeping the lines of communication open?
I think, I learned it as a journalist, but it's always more about the listening than the talking. So you need a bit of both. You need to really hear what's available to you and what's around you. And when somebody says, let me help, you've got to be able to hear that as well and know that they mean it, and not bat it away and not pretend it's all going to be okay and you can fix everything yourself. Because, none of us are superhuman. We're part of a race of people who are there to support each other. And that's not to say everyone's going to be your new best friend, but we just need that one person that's going to allow us to be heard. And I think just being able to say the difficult stuff out loud to one person, whether that's, I put a lot of, as you said, the helplines and stuff on in the book as well, whether that's somebody at the end of the phone who's quite anonymous, and you just feel so lifted by being able to say those difficult things, whatever your situation. I remember the first time I was driving back from the hospital after I got the diagnosis with cancer, which is my experience. Everybody's got their own thing that they're going through. And I knocked at a friend's door on the way home, and I told her, which must have been quite shocking for her, and I said to her, I just needed to say it out loud. I just needed to hear the words come out of my mouth, and that kind of somehow made it real. And then once it became real, then I knew I had something to deal with, and then I had to confront it. And like I say, you heard the rest. Some days that was tougher than others. And that's the same for all of us when we're going through a really difficult situation. It's going to be peaks and troughs. It's going to be really difficult. But if we stop talking, I think then the other big risk is that we start catastrophizing. So something that might be manageable suddenly becomes huge and then unmanageable. And then we stop asking for help because it seems too overwhelming. So the first thing is try and have that conversation when you have your first thought, not when that thought becomes what ifs and what ifs and what ifs, because suddenly those what ifs have turned one problem into 1,000 problems or one much bigger problem. Yeah, I think communication is everything. We need to be heard.
Great. Well, the book is Fitter, Stronger, Resilience. If you're going through hell, keep going. Paula Kerr, it's been great to chat to you. Just remind us where people can find out more about your work then.
Okay, so if you want to know about any of the stuff I do, or if you want to get in touch, then if you have a look online at fitterstronger.org, and everything's on there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
So check out Paula's book. The link will be in the show notes. And of course, we didn't mention alcohol much in that piece, but I thought I'd just actually tell you what Paula says in the book about alcohol. She's got obviously a whole well-being section. And this was great for me to read this, because so many books written by people who have come through illness or who want to share their well-being tips, they just almost always say, oh well, if you feel you might be drinking too much, that same old thing, have an alcohol-free day, yeah. And they say things like a little bit of what you fancy does you good, and all that stuff. And I'm guilty of it. This is what I hate more than anything. So, I'm guilty of this stuff. My first book absolutely had that in it. I look back now, I'm so proud of that first book, Imperfectly Natural Woman, but I cringe when I read the stuff about alcohol. What was I even thinking, Anyways, what's really refreshing about Paula's book is that although this, isn't a thing for her, she does do a piece about alcohol. She gets an expert to explain that alcohol is a suppressant. It says here, alcohol is a suppressant of neural activity. So in a convoluted way, it's a downer, even though it appears to elevate our mood. It brings the teenager out in us, which inhibits our decision-making, and therefore we're less strategic in our decisions, etc. So it goes on to explain just how bad alcohol is for us. And then Paula says here, incidentally, the idea of having a glass of red wine a day for improved health is total myth and nonsense. There is a linear relationship between our alcohol consumption and our mortality. People make their own choices, but there's no argument for the consumption of alcohol as a healthy substance. If we want the health benefits of red wine, we are far better off having a handful of blueberries. Yes, High five to that. Absolutely. My views entirely. And as I so often say, if you think you need the resveratrol, have a grape. And to quote the wonderful Catherine Gray, having a glass of red wine for its alcohol benefits is rather like choosing a burger for the gherkin. Talking to Catherine Gray, I think I mentioned that I did a piece for the Sober Spring campaign that she is doing with Alcohol Change UK. So I wrote an article on baby boomers and alcohol, having some fun there. We're talking about baby sham from the old days. So if you go to Alcohol Change UK, you can read that article there on alcohol and baby boomers. What else I've got to tell you? Obviously, my book's out, Happy, Healthy, Sober. You can get yourself a copy in all the usual places. Please leave me a review. If you want a signed copy, you can just go to thesoberclub.com and click on shop. And of course, we are open for members if you did want to join us. There is a little monthly cost, but it's incredible value. We do all sorts of amazing things. This week we've got a alcohol-free cocktail making workshop with liars. We've got an angel expert going to be sharing some stuff with us. We've got William Porter going to be doing some stuff on coming out of lockdown, how we deal with cravings, all of that kind of stuff. We've got a skincare masterclass coming up. I mean, just on and on. It's all about health and well-being, but it's that thing about it being underpinned that the sobriety piece is the bedrock. I was talking earlier before I went into Paula's interview about how so many clients are finding that they're recognizing now that they need to find that resilience, that support, if you like. And what I mean by that is the kind of the foundation, really. They recognize that yes, sobriety just does change everything, but not on its own. It's not enough to, in inverted commas, just stop drinking. We need to see sobriety as the bedrock, as the foundation, and then we can work on all the other layers. And that's really what the Sober Club is about. It's about the the joy of having that foundation in place. Or for some people, they're on day one, so they're just starting, and then looking at all these other amazing things that we can unravel and we can add in to live the best lives we can, to find what everyone wants, really, happiness, right? That's kind of it, isn't it? Anyways, I'll see you same time next week. You know where to find me, at Janey Lee Grace on pretty much all the social media channels. If you want to follow me, check out thesoberclub.com. You know where to find the book. If you are struggling, always reach out. There's always help available. Don't go within and retreat. Reach out for help, just as we were talking about in that interview, that the importance of communication, it really is everything. If you're doing this right now and you're going through this and it's early days for you, then, we're sending you lots of good vibes, and hang on in there and give yourself a massive hug. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by the Sober Club. Please rate and review. And if you want support, accountability and inspiration, and you want to live your best life without the booze, check out thesoberclub.com.